In this video, I'm going to tell you 5 reasons why I think that HDR is a massive gimmick. Reason number 1, I think HDR is a huge gimmick. The experience that you get with HDR pretty much depends on how much money you spend on your TV. The TVs that you buy like on Black Friday at Best Buy for $300 or $400 are basically SDR televisions that have like the HDMI chipset that can allow HDR signals to be processed within television, but they're no better than the old TV that you had. They're basically SDR televisions that can tone map the HDR curve down to a level that they can accept. The content that you'll see in SDR, like with SDR content, will look vastly superior than HDR because it's being tone mapped so dramatically to make it suitable for that television. In order to get like a real HDR experience, you need to buy a solid television that can, at least pump out 5, maybe 600, 700 minimum nits of peak brightness. Without that, you're not really going to get a good HDR experience. Reason number 2, HDR makes televisions way too complicated. For most people out there, they just want to watch TV. They don't want to be messing with settings and stuff. In fact, most people don't even change the setting from what the TV comes in, like vivid or like dynamic mode. Most people just leave it like that from the factory because they think that brightness equals good. When they look at the television at the Best Buy or wherever they buy the TV, they're always set to the brightest setting because brightness attracts. It's like a bird of paradise dance where they're like dancing around trying to find a mate. That's exactly what they're doing. It's the same concept for televisions. They want the television to be as bright as possible, so to get more people so that it catches their eyes. Like, that TV's bright, that's got to be a good TV. HDR makes TV way too complicated. You have to worry about your settings. You got to worry about 4 different HDR standards. You got HDR10, HDR10 Plus, Dolby Vision, and HLG. Is my source compatible? Does the content that I'm watching, does Netflix have Dolby Vision, or do I have an Apple TV that supports Dolby Vision? Do I have an NVIDIA Shield or whatever? You have to think about all this stuff. It's too complicated. That's why I think, the format, the HDR format war needs to be one by one standard, be it Dolby Vision or HDR10 Plus or something. It's, if one, maybe eventually that will happen. One standard will win out. But for now, too complicated for the non-enthusiast person. One of my biggest gripes with HDR. So reason number 3, one of my biggest gripes is it's not backwards compatible. It totally made perfectly good televisions, including plasma televisions that were fantastic and still that are better than many of the televisions right now that are out right now. So many good televisions that were just like overnight made obsolete because of HDR. It's such a waste because, like I said, reason number 1, a lot of the TVs out there right now are basically SDR televisions. In other words, just normal plain old televisions that can tone map the HDR curve. The older televisions that were not HDR were absolutely capable of displaying all the HDR colors, as well as some of the televisions that are being sold today as HDR. For instance, in this very room, I have a 1080p. I have an Epson 5030UB, which is a 1080p non-HDR. It's a non-HDR projector. I use Panasonic Blu-ray player, which actually tone maps the image to make HDR HDR images look good on this projector. And I also use a madVR, and a home theater PC using Kodi DS player. And it actually tone maps the image to look fine on my. It looks perfectly good, to be honest. There's nothing. This projector gets as bright as a lot of the projectors that are being sold today. And when I watch an HDR movie on my projector, it looks great. And it's all because of the tone mapping. It has nothing to do with the brightness. It has nothing to do. The only limitation that this projector has is the fact that it can't tone map the HDR signal by itself. So backwards compatibility is a huge downside to HDR. They totally could have, I'm sure they could have done something to where the HDR signal could have fallen back to some, like a lower level standard, but they didn't do that because they wanted to sell you more TVs. And that's just reality. So reason number 4, is it really better? Is HDR really better? I don't think I've seen a single movie or TV show that I've seen with HDR, and I have a pretty good HDR TV upstairs that I have a Vizio that pumps out about 750 nits or so. So it's not a slouch with HDR. I know there are televisions out there that are much brighter, like hitting 2000 nits, but you know, they cost a fortune. And I'm not going to spend that much on a television that'll become obsolete in a couple of years. I'm just not, I'm more like, typically when I buy TVs, I'm more of the middle ground. I prefer spending about, I try to stay below like the high end, because it's just, they just depreciate, and it's like throwing your money away. When the experience that you're getting is not, to my eyes, is not like night and day difference. It's just diminishing returns, you know. Once you pass like the mid-level TVs, it's diminishing returns. In my opinion, you may disagree with that. You may be totally stoked that you spend $5,000 on a television, you know, whatever makes you happy. But for me, I like to stick under $1,000, under $1,000 for TVs. I spent about $1,500 on my 82-inch Samsung, or actually $1,400 after a price cut, and that's because it was an 82-inch television, and you know, it's a really big TV, and I felt that the price was justified for that. Again, that TV maxes out about 350 nits and works fine for me, in my opinion. Reason number 5, it can actually make your content look worse. For example, the other day I was watching the new Game of Thrones show, House of the Dragon. I was watching a scene, I think I'll try to put it up there, that there was like a battle that took place at night. And I was watching it in HDR, and I was like, I can barely see anything. And I thought in my mind, man, I wonder if I put that on, if I shut off HDR on my NVIDIA Shield, will it actually look better? So I turned off HDR, and lo and behold, I could see everything on the screen. Another thing I did was I went in the TV menu and adjusted the gamma up 1 notch. So I took it from 0 to +1, and that corrected it a bit. But again, most people aren't going to do that. They're just going to think that the show looks like crap because or they can't see anything, or they're just going to think that the show is just super dark. And it's not. It's not supposed to look like. You're supposed to be able to see what's on the screen. It's basically all about tone mapping again. It boils down to how good your TV handles it. So in my opinion, it doesn't always look better. You have to, mess around with, when you have to mess around so much with like settings and stuff, it just makes it harder for the end user that isn't an enthusiast. So what's my recommendation? Why am I coming up with this list? More than I'm just ranting about why my frustrations with HDR and how I think it's a scam or a gimmick, whatever you want to call it. As far as like the visual upgrade, I would put it low. Back in the beginning of television, we went from black and white to color. Huge upgrade, massive upgrade, life-changing upgrade. Then we were stuck in like the SDR, like 480p standard for the like 50 plus years, right? Until we finally got HD 1080p video or 720p video. That was another massive upgrade in my opinion, and from that point I feel like there have been diminishing returns. The upgrade from HD to 4K has been, somewhat noticeable, definitely if you have a bigger screen, but it's not life-changing. In other words, it does not make my movie going experience any much better. I still play Blu-rays all the time, and they still look great in my opinion. In fact, there are a lot of cases where 4K Blu-rays look worse than the regular Blu-rays. They take the old movie and they smooth it out and take out all the grain, and sometimes you just mess with the movie too much. And I've seen a lot of videos where people just say they compare the A/B, like the Blu-ray versus the 4K version, and the Blu-ray still looks better. And what I'm trying to say is that there have been diminishing returns since the rise of HD, and since they already had 4K established, and that I kind of got stuck in I have a Vizio TV that I kind of bought in very early on into the 4K, to the jump to 4K, because I thought it was cool. I wanted to have like the newest tech, and I swear to God, I felt like a year later, HDR just was everywhere all of a sudden, and I was stuck with a 4K television that did not support HDR. So it was kind of like a redheaded stepchild of a television that's just kind of in between worlds of like 4K and HDR and like HD. A stepping stone between HD and 4K HDR. I had like the 4K television with no HDR, and I still have that TV and it works. I actually have a video where I repaired the power supply on it. I'll put a card of it if you're interested. Still works, but yeah, doesn't accept HDR, and I'm kind of stuck with this whole like backwards compatibility problem that I talked about. So what do I recommend with TVs? Personally, you do whatever makes you happy. If you want to spend $5,000, like I said, or more on like an 8K TV that, you know, pumps out 3,000 nits of like peak brightness, and you know, if that makes you happy, that's great. But I really think the sweet spot for TVs is just $600 to $1,000 range. Hisense, Vizio, and TCL make fantastic televisions for about that $6,000 to $1,000 price range in, you know, different sizes. You may have to spend a little more if you want to get a giant like 80+ inch television. That's just a given. I mean, it's a bigger TV, just it costs more to manufacture. So what do you think? Do you agree with my opinion on HDR? Do you agree that it's a gimmick? It's just frustrating. You know, I'm not, and I'm the kind of guy that would fit, I will take the time to figure out a problem with one of my, if I have a problem with my picture, I'm probably going to figure out what's going on and try to correct it myself. But a lot of people aren't going to do that. That's why I made this video, because I do think that HDR complicates things a little too much for the average consumer. But yeah, if you agree with me, shout it out in the comments. Let me know what you think. Anyway, if you found this video helpful or entertaining, it would be really great if you can give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps a lot. And I'll see you in the next one.